Chapter 1. The night was dark and full of hostile mobs. Ben could hear them, just beyond the light of his torches. He heard shuffling footsteps, the clatter of bones, and in the distance a lone, inhumane moan. Every instinct told Ben to turn around, to go back inside, to run away from those eerie nocturnal noises. Instead, he moved toward them. Ben shuddered with fear as he left his small circle of light. The light was cast by torches that he placed all around his modest shelter. The squat stone and dirt dwelling was not at all impressive. But in the warm yellow hues of the torchlight, it was like a bright and welcoming island in a sea of darkness. Ben hated to leave his little oasis, but even without the torches, he could see well enough. The moon overhead was bright, and the plain stretched out all around him, with only the occasional tree to block his view. With a bit of luck and some skillful sneaking, he would be able to avoid the monsters that prowled at the night. He saw red eyes glowing up ahead. They were the eyes of a spider on the hunt. He crouched low and stopped moving. He stayed completely still. He watched for a moment to learn if the red eyes were watching him back. But they moved haphazardly, drifting off to the west. Ben went east. It wasn't that Ben was helpless. He had survived his fair share of fights. He was equipped with an iron sword, a shield, and iron armor. Not the best equipment he'd ever used, but good enough to give him the upper hand against any overworld mob he might encounter. But on a night like tonight, on an open plain like this one, a battle would draw too much attention. Ben might easily be outnumbered and overwhelmed. He was better off staying low and quiet and avoiding fights if he could. This had all been a lot easier when he had a partner, but things were different now. These days, Ben was less an adventurer and more of a babysitter. And he hadn't been doing a great job of that. "Johnny," he whispered, "Johnny, are you out here?" As if in response, the low moaning sounded again, closer than before. Ben peered into the gloom, scanning the horizon. In the middle distance, he saw an outline of a humanoid figure. He couldn't see much detail in the moonlight, but he could see the outstretched arms and the sickly greenish hue of the skin. It was a zombie, but was it the zombie Ben was looking for? Ben crept closer before speaking again. "Johnny, is that you?" A growl was his answer. A growl, a mindless, vicious lunge. In a mindless, vicious lunge, Ben acted instinctively, jumping back while slashing his sword ahead of him. The move kept him out of the zombie's reach, even as the creature took damage. At melee range, by the light of the moon, he could clearly see that this was not the zombie he was looking for, which was lucky for him, actually. He was supposed to keep Johnny safe, not hit him with the sword. This zombie, however, he could fight to his heart's content. Ben lunged, slashed, and then stepped back, careful to always stay out of the mob's reach. After avoiding trouble for so long, it felt good to let loose. But he was rusty. Ben misjudged the timing of his final lunge, and the zombie's claw swipe struck him in the chest. Ben stumbled back. Even through his chest plate, he felt a flare of pain. "So rude," he said, slashing out with his sword. The zombie collapsed, defeated, and left behind a scrap of rotten flesh. Ben knew it was edible, and his food supply was running low, but he wasn't that desperate. Not yet. Nearby, another groan sounded. It was just as he feared. The battle had drawn unwanted attention. Ben whirled around, sword raised, and just barely stopped himself in time. Johnny! I nearly cut you in half, bad baby. But the mom standing before him was, in fact, a baby, but not a typical one. Johnny had been attacked during the zombie siege and transformed into one of the undead. His skin was green, his eyes shone red beneath a heavy black brow, and his clothes were dirty and tattered. He also wore a lead, which Ben reached for immediately. Johnny growled and snapped at Ben's hand. Hey, no! Ben said. Just because your sister isn't here doesn't mean it's back to bitey. Behave yourself. Johnny growled again, but it was a low, quiet growl that sounded to Ben almost like an apology, or maybe a growl just like a growl, and Ben had been spending far too much time in the company of zombies. Ben had encountered plenty of zombie villagers before, and those encounters usually ended in a fight that one that only Ben walked away from, but a strange and special bond had developed between him and Johnny. It helped that Johnny's big sister Bobbie had somehow been able to teach him basic manners. When they first met, Bobbie had hired Ben to help her find a cure for her brother's condition, but they become separated, and the last thing Bobbie had said to Ben was that it was his responsibility to keep her brother safe. Ben liked responsibility about as much as zombies liked sunlight, which reminded him, we need to get back home, Ben said, and this time he grabbed Johnny's lead without any complaint from the young zombie. The sun will be up soon, so unless you want to wear your special hat. Ben held out a carved pumpkin. When worn as a helmet, it kept Johnny protected from the sunlight, but the babies absolutely hated wearing it. As soon as he saw it, he growled and grumbled, pulling on the lead as if trying to get away. Okay, I'm putting it back in my inventory, said Ben, but that means we need to go back to the house right now. Bobbie will never find us if we stray too far, and she'll definitely never forgive me if you catch fire. I might feel a little bad about it too. At the mention of his sister's name, Johnny emitted a low, mournful growl. He pulled again at his lead, but softly this time. He wasn't trying to escape Ben's grasp. He was trying to lead him across the plain. So that's why you wandered off, said Ben. You miss your sister, is that it? You want to go find her? Johnny's growl sounded almost like a purr. Sorry, buddy, Ben told him. The Overworld is too big. She could be anywhere. He shook his head. We have to stay where we are and trust that she will find us. Johnny almost seemed to be skulking on the walk back to their shelter. He dragged his feet, ignoring Ben's whispered request to hurry up. Of course, Johnny had nothing to fear for the night. The monsters of the Overworld recognized him as one of their own, whereas they recognized Ben as a potential meal, a tasty one. We're almost home, Ben whispered. We'll get a good night's rest, and then things will look better in treasure. Even in the face of danger and uncertainty, Ben was an adventurer at heart, and adventurers love loot. A little detour won't hurt, he reasoned. Ben hadn't walked this path before. What he thought at a distance was a simple tree turned out to be an arc of stone and obsidian. It looked almost like a portal, but an incomplete one, or perhaps the one that had fallen into despair. He didn't have the tools to harvest the obsidian, but there was a chest tucked up against the structure. Whatever it contained was his for the taking. Ben lifted the lid, and when he saw the glint of gold, his heart soared. For a moment, he thought he found a golden apple, a key ingredient in the cure they needed for Johnny. But he was wrong. It wasn't a golden apple within the chest, but a golden carrot. Maybe it works the same? He wondered. He wondered out loud, and he held it out for Johnny to take a taste. The zombie boy swatted the gold-plated vegetable away. Yeah, probably not, said Ben, and he stashed the carrot in his inventory. After they left the ruined portal behind, it was easy to find their shelter. On a night like this one, its lights were visible at a great distance. As they re-entered the glow of the torches, Ben felt a rush of relief. He allowed himself to feel safe again. He stopped looking over his shoulder for fear of an ambush. He had dropped his guard too soon. Torchlight stopped new monsters from spawning, but it didn't always keep the monsters that already prowled the night. And one monster found its way to the shelter, and as it rounded the corners and came into view, it made its persistence known with a sudden, urgent hiss. "Creeper!" cried Ben. "Get back!" Ben put himself between the creeper and Johnny, shoving the zombie boy to safety as the creeper exploded. Ben felt the impact all along his iron-armored back, but he managed to stay on his feet. If he'd been any slower, both he and Johnny might have been eradicated. They'd been lucky this time. "Are you okay?" Ben asked. Johnny grumbled. Ben turned to examine the damage done by the creeper's explosion. It was extensive. Fully half of the shelter had been blown away, and Ben's meager belongings, the resources he'd been able to gather during the daylight and then stashed in a simple wooden chest, had been scattered all over the ground. Where the creeper had stood, there was now a hole in the ground, and the nearest torch had been blown away. The light snuffed out. More monsters might appear at any moment. "This is hopeless," Ben said. "I don't have the materials I need to make a better shelter." He turned to look at Johnny. "And I can't keep an eye on you and mine resources at the same time." Ben peered into the hole the explosions had made. Beneath the ground, he could see the minecart tracks that had brought him here. He remembered where the tracks led. "But I know where we can find a real shelter," he grinned, then turned to clap Johnny on the shoulders. "Logan's not using his fortress anymore. How about you and I move in?" Johnny tried to bite Ben's hand, and he quickly pulled them away. He was pretty sure that was Johnny's way of saying, "Good idea, Ben. You're the best. Lead on." Chapter 2. Far away and on the move, Bobbie had problems of her own. Sunlight was a distant memory, and sleep was a foreign concept. She'd been on her feet, marching in a dark subterranean tunnel for she didn't know how long. How long had it been since she's been separated from Ben and her brother? How long since she decided to follow the foe as he marched at the head of his army into the darkness? She didn't know the answer. Not that there was anyone to ask her. Bobbie was alone, truly alone, for the first time in her life. She thought of her brother. She remembered him as he had once been, a charming, sometimes frustrating, rambunctious little baby who enjoyed jumping on beds and collecting flowers from the village golem. And then she remembered him as he was now, green-skinned, half-wild, prone to biting, a zombie. And it was all because of the bottomless greed of one person, an adventurer named Logan. Logan was the head of her in his very tunnel. The only thing standing between Bobbie and her foe was about 300 zombies. Maybe it was Maybe it was only 200. Bobbie really hadn't had a chance to actually count them. All she knew was there were a lot of them. Logan had gathered them from all over, trapping wild zombies and then using those zombies to affect villagers. Bobbie had seen it firsthand. She watched as her own family, friends, and neighbors had been transformed, infected, just as her brother had been, and now they were among the great horde of undead creatures. Now Logan was leading through this massive, seemingly endless tunnel, on the way to somewhere. Nowhere good, Bobbie figured. Even as Bobbie followed, she kept her distance. If the zombies discovered her, if they turned around and attacked her in the mass, she wouldn't last for long against their numbers, and she had no idea how astute a zombie's senses might be. Could they smell her if she got close? Could they see her in the dark? She didn't know. So she had to be careful, cautious, but above all, she couldn't let the zombies get away. If they got away, she might never find them again, and then her friends and neighbors would be lost to her forever. A sound went up, echoing up and down the great tunnel. It wasn't the groan of a zombie this time. Those came frequently enough. This was the sound of a goat horn. She knew by now that it was the signal to stop marching and rest, and that meant she was about to have company. Bobbie looked around for a hiding spot, but this section of tunnel had been carved out by human hands. There were no alcoves or stalagmites to hide behind. The smooth, regular walls. She would have to make her own hiding spot, and quickly. Armed with a pickaxe, she made short work of the stone wall, cutting a narrow hole just 1 block wide, 2 blocks tall, and 3 blocks deep. She stepped inside it and replaced one of the stones she had just cut away, so that she was half hidden and obscured in shadow. She'd be very difficult to spot, while she would still have a view of whatever happened next. She watched as a fast-moving figure emerged from the darkness. He stayed just beyond the reach of the horde of zombies as he dropped fencing all around them. It was far too dark to see in detail, but Bobbie could guess that he was trembling with fear. He wore a full set of leather armor, and he clearly knew it would not be enough to keep him safe if the horde got their hand on him. The figure was named Ben, but it wasn't her Ben, not the friend she left behind to watch her brother. This was a boy she thought of as Other Ben. He was Logan's so-called squire, more like his servant really, and it was his job to keep the zombies moving in the direct direction. That meant lowering them forward with turtle legs during the day and laying down a barrier to keep the mobs from wandering off at night. It must be night then, Bobbie reasoned, and she was certainly tired enough to rest. She watched as Other Ben hurriedly set the last piece of fence into place, connecting it to the stone wall. The leather helmet slipped around on his head, and he had to keep moving it back into place. Dude, what's taking so long? That was Logan, rounding the makeshift fence with a look of irritation on his face. He was wearing armor too, but it was made of diamond. His helmet fit him perfectly. I'm done, said Other Ben. The fence is all finished. It's about time, said Logan. And don't forget to pack it all up in the morning, right? Wood doesn't grow on trees, you know. Yeah, I know, said Other Ben. Logan chortled. Wood does grow on trees. That was a joke. Lighten up, kid. Logan smacked Other Ben in the back in a way that looked almost friendly, but it was a harder hit than it needed to be. Other Ben winced, and his helmet tilted. X knew. Get dinner ready, alright? I'm starving, Logan said, and he turned to head back to the front of the horde. Bobbie watched from her highness' place as other Ben sighed. He righted his helmet, then sat down a bed, a furnace in the chest. Bobbie wished she could do the same. She briefly considered digging a bit deeper, carving out a proper room for herself, with space for a bed, but the danger of oversleeping was too great. What if Logan's army was gone when she woke? How could she be certain she'd catch up to them again? In the end, she decided that she couldn't risk sleeping, nor could she risk lighting a furnace. The fire might draw unwanted attention, so it would be a cold dinner again, and a long night, punctuated with the moans and groans of a nearby horde. One thing for sure, the sounds of that many zombies just a few blocks away were eerie enough to prevent her from dozing off. As she sheltered for the night, her eyes drifted again to other Ben. He was organizing his belongings, moving some items to the simple wooden chest. When he pulled a toilet egg from his inventory, the nearby zombies went wild, straining to reach past the wooden fence. Other Ben jumped back as if uncertain what level the fence would hold. He quickly put the egg away. Bobbie didn't know why, but the zombies really had it in for turtle eggs. They would go out of their way to smash them. That was how Logan kept his undead army on the march. They followed the turtle eggs, which other bands, frightened out of his wits, carried just out of reach. Bobbie found that interesting. I think I'm hatching a plan, she whispered to herself, and she chuckled at her own pun. And then sighing, she thought, her Ben, would have laughed at that one. Chapter 3. Ben would have preferred to travel above ground in the light of the sun, but Johnny didn't want to wear the carved pumpkin helmet that would protect him from the harmful rays of sunlight. Not that Johnny had said so out loud, but the gnashing and slashing gave Ben a pretty strong impression of Johnny's opinion on the subject. And traveling above ground at night invited all sorts of problems. If Ben got into a fight, would Johnny help out, as he had when his sister had been around? Would Ben have to worry about keeping his young charge safe in the midst of chaos? Or would the zombie boy take the opportunity to slip away from Ben and disappear into the night? In the end, it was no choice at all. Ben and Johnny would have to travel by tunnel. It was a tunnel they traveled once before. Fortunately, there were torches to prevent hostile mobs from spawning, and a railroad track that would lead them right to the destination. There could be all sorts of riches right beneath our feet. You know, said Ben, emeralds and redstone and diamond ore. Stuff I could use to make better gear. He held up an iron pickaxe. Maybe we should make a little detour to go out and see what we could find. Nah, said Johnny. Ben sighed. I wish you could talk, even if just to disagree with what I was saying. He grinned. Your sister disagreed with me all the time. It got on my nerves sometimes, but it was better than walking in silence. Ma, said Johnny. Silence might be better than the inhumane noises, though, Ben replied. Although Ben had suggested it, he didn't dare make a minor detour. There was the obvious problem. Digging deeper meant more danger, but aside from that, if Ben lost the railway, he might never find it again, and if that happened, he probably wouldn't be able to find Fort Lot. Logan, Ben's traitorous partner, former friend, and current least favorite person, had built the fortress as well as the excessive series of tunnels that led to it. Both were key aspects of his mad ambitions to raise an army of the undead. Ben and Bobbie had attempted to put a stop to the whole thing, but they'd been separated, with Bobbie staying behind in the hope of following Logan and killing the zombies. She sent Ben and Johnny to safety in a high-speed automated minecart, entrusting her zombie semblance to Ben's care. When the minecart had finally come to a stop, Ben had built a small structure above ground and surrounded it with enough torches to make a beacon visible from a great distance. He has assumed Bobbie would return to them, and he wanted to stay where she would be certain to find them. But many days have passed, with no sign of her. As Johnny grew more restless, Ben grew more concerned. What had Bobbie gotten herself into? What could possibly keep her away from her brother, whom she loved so dearly? How could she hope to thwart Logan without the help of Ben, who had far more combat experience than she did, and had seen pretty much every biome the Overworld had to offer? Ben was pondering these questions as he and Johnny approached the end of the tunnel. Well, that's new, Ben said. He expected to be able to enter the fortress directly from the tunnel, but a wall had been built. A lustrous black blockade at the tunnel's mouth. Obsidian, he said, running a hand along the super tough material. And all I've got is an iron pickaxe, which would be slow and loud. I don't know about you, but I'd rather not announce our presence just yet. He looked at Johnny. We'll have to go up, unless you have another idea. No, said Johnny. I assume that means it's anonymous, said Ben. Up we go! It was simple enough to build a basic staircase and cut through the stony ceiling of the tunnel. As luck would have it, night had fallen. While Johnny was born up in the sun, he had nothing to fear from moonlight. Ben, on the other hand, felt a shudder feel as he emerged onto the surface. Logan's fortress loomed over him, as imposing as it had ever been, with a red and black skull and crossbones banner and zombie heads placed on posts. The heads were blank-eyed, staring out at the surrounding plateau and seeing nothing. Ben covered Johnny's eyes. Don't look, you'll get nightmares. Johnny slapped at Ben's hand. Alright, said Ben, you are the nightmare. Then Ben's gaze landed on something truly menacing. Halfway up the fortress, there were figures moving in a lit window. Even at distance, he recognized them. Hatchet and Flip, he said. Logan's cronies. They were dangerous, unpredictable, and cruel. The fortress wasn't the safe haven for Ben. Hey, the safe haven Ben had hoped for. But it wasn't safe outside of the fortress either. Ben scanned the darkness for enemies. He knew it was only a matter of time before some creature came lurching forward to attack. Slime bars, Ben muttered under his breath. Any ideas, Johnny? The zombie boy growled unhealthily. Not for the first time, and not for the last. Ben wished that Bobbie were there with them, because at this moment Ben was strongly considering launching an assault on two expert combatants on their home turf. He could use some backup, or even better, he could use someone there to talk to him out of the whole thing.